Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're gonna look at 50 amazing historical photos, starting off with this one, bikini girl on the beach in the Boardwalk, 1959. The fashion from that day was so different, especially the hairstyle, the bikini, just everything was so different. These are workers at a telephone switchboard, 1945. Now that was a job which was very important back in the day, but now everything is automated, digitalized, so yeah, it's completely gone. That job doesn't even exist anymore. Just imagine how the world just changed just in 60 years. This is a photo of flight attendants, 1960s. Now the funny thing about flight attendants is that they would use lots of gimmicky tactics and marketing back in the day to attract men to their airlines, because back in the day in the 60s and 70s the vast majority of clients were of course males. This one is a weird funny one. This is a New Year's Eve, 1960s in a party. Quite shocking, isn't it? I mean, speaks for itself. We have here two girls in a major glass of like cocktail. So yeah, absolutely speechless. This is the One Times Square under construction, 1903. This is just the beginning of the creation of this very interesting building. This is the bread line in New York City after the Great Crack, after the Great Depression, 1932. Here, literally, people would go and be fed, okay, because they would be unemployed. Now, the line, as you can see in the picture, goes all the way around, and it just shows, guys, that these people were in grave need at that time. This is the Eads Bridge in St. Louis in 1874, only when the construction of this was barely happening. This is a peddler's wagon in the Netherlands, 1930s. Look at that. I mean, the wagon would sell all sorts of homeware and, baskets and other stuff ready for your home needs. So yeah, this is quite an interesting photo, guys. These are the wedding rings of the Holocaust victims in 1945. As you can see here, there is a ton of them. This is the Paris Street Market, 1920. Of course, back in the day, people would go much often to the market because supermarket did not exist, only local shops. So the concept of a supermarket is only actually recent, from maybe the 60s, 70s. Until then, effectively, people would go to these markets, open air markets, to do their shopping, and it was quite a thing. Here we have a roadside vendor in Oklahoma, 1973. That's right, she would potentially sell flowers, most likely. I mean, yeah, this is just funny, but at the same time, it's something that even happens in this day and age that has not stopped whatsoever, even after 50 years. Now, this one is funny. This is a woman hiding a flask in her boot, 1922. This was during the Prohibition in America, and people would find many ways to hide the alcohol in very colorful ways. This is kids playing in Brooklyn, 1948, after the Second World War, and of course, society was still recovering from the war and from the economy, from the crisis. So yeah, as you can see here, the buildings, it tells by itself that society was still recovering effectively. Here we have women lumber mill workers, 1918. Now that is a very rare sight, especially women working as lumberers. Downtown Las Vegas, guys, 1952. Now this has changed a lot compared to then and now. Of course, what's missing is the massive giant hotels, which are now visible. A traffic jam in Los Angeles, 1953. Look at the cars, man. They're super classy and I just love the design. It's just so cool. Gas shortage, gas stealers beware. That's right, 1970. So back in the day, there was actually quite a problem with this in the 70s, and people would actually defend their car gas with their guns. So yeah, quite shocking, guys, isn't it? This is a restaurant sit-in protest, 1961, when, of course, in many restaurants, they would separate the blacks and the whites. So this is people who are protesting against that very ridiculous rule. A picnic in the park, 1910. Of course, the picnic has not changed, but the clothing and the fashion has changed massively just in 100 years. Here we have a dapper skater, 1937, skating in a very fashionable suit, isn't it? This is Little Italy in New York, 1900. That's right, guys. You have here lots of fresh produce, people who would literally buy stuff from Italy, and of course, lots of families who emigrated in America who came from Italy, so it was quite a huge community. These are bathing suits from 1944, bathing beauties as they call them, and you can see here the fashion was quite nice and the flower designs were very intricate. Here is a contest for beauty pageants in 1920. Now, of course, as you can see here, the clothes they're wearing is very interesting, and I would say like almost like handmade effectively. I'm not sure, but quite different from today's contests. This is a shocking one, guys. A stuntman which is preparing to drop into an automobile, 1921. Now, stunts back in the day, before digital technology was of course advanced, were even more dangerous, and many people would get very injured or even potentially lose their life because some of the stunts were rather quite dangerous. The classical unemployed man, 1935, after the Great Depression in 1929, and this photo was quite common back in the day, especially in North America. This is a very interesting contraption called the bike sailing in Florida, 1903. You would literally put a net and you would have a sailing bike on the beach, which was used for effectively entertainment and recreation. This one is a classic Harley Davidson 1955, one of the most iconic motorcycles ever to have existed in history. This is a family listening to news of the war, 1942. Back then, when of course people had sometimes just radio, it was quite a family gathering. Like people would gather in the afternoon to listen to the radio, and it was quite a big event. Like they would even make cookies or something, and it was like I would say the most important event in the afternoon when the family was gathering and then effectively listening to what was happening in the world with their radio box. This is people on their way to the Woodstock Festival, the legendary festival from 1969, which was always recorded in history as one of the most incredible festivals ever in the history of humankind. This is Times Square, New York in 1898. Look at that, guys. You don't have any major buildings, you just have some small buildings, very basic, and it was almost looking like a countryside town. Now, of course, the difference is quite abysmal. Just look at this. This is just incredible how it changed in such a short amount of time, if you think about it. This is Harlem, 1970. The fashion of the 70s, guys, was all over the place and people were just excited about this fashion and everyone was wearing this. I mean, when I say everyone, I am literally saying everyone. Here are greasers in New York, 1950. Basically, lots of bands of juvenile delinquents sometimes, or just kids who were just hanging out in the park and of course going on to mischief. This is New Orleans in 1950. I mean, looking at this photo, if you would just show it to me, I would tell you that this is like from Cuba, for example, but I would never thought that this is effectively New Orleans in the 50s. Check that out. This is the Chicago L train in 1949. The railroads back in the day were still quite basic, but at the same time we see this very nicely parking lot, really organized, and I like the cars. They look so classy. These are young men with toy airplanes, 1934. Look at that. I mean, they were playing with them, and apparently it was quite a popular sport back in the day to effectively build your own toy plane and play with it outside. Disneyland in 1961. That's right, guys, quite a change, isn't it? I mean, look at this, like look at the designs, it was much more basic, but yes, this is a photo from Disneyland when it was starting and it was getting little by little popular in their theme parks. This is the office life in the 1920s, guys. Oh my god, I mean, you're just in front of a machine typing stuff in there, like it's just crazy. And of course, this is the computing division, okay? The computing division, you have also some of the supervisors walking around and then the people working at the machine for, I don't know, like 4 hours straight and then a short break. I have no idea, guys, but yeah, quite shocking, isn't it? This is Detroit 1920. The cars and the classic buses are just amazing, isn't it? This is the Missouri University Shooting Club. That's right, you heard it right. The shooting club at the university in 1934. Just imagine, like, if you would hear today about that, that would just be unheard of. A shooting club in a university. Only happens in America. High school dancing in 1950s. If you ever watched Back to the Future, you know exactly how this goes. This is the classic dances of the 50s and in all of its glory. This is the first cable train in San Francisco, 1981, very classy, and also everyone dressed in those very typical black clothes, especially the gentlemen, they're wearing the full-on costume. This is effectively the method of staying cool in New York, summer 1943. There was quite big heat waves back there, so people would do anything they can to effectively cool off the best way they could, and this was just one example of what they would try to do. This is a beach in Miami, 1930s, alright, and it says there, law requires full bathing suits, because back in the day, the bikinis in the 30s were quite prohibited, and many women would actually be fined if they would be wearing too much revealing skin in the 30s. This is Party Girls in Paris, 1966. I mean, look at the fashion. The fashion is a bit more conservative, but at the same time more classy. And you can see that people are having a pretty good time. This is the National Guard in Italy, 1945, just at the end of the Second World War. This is a couple on a date in 1950. That's right, guys, quite interesting, isn't it? This is the Chicago Theater in 1944. It stands out by quite a lot in the middle of the city. Here we have a baseball team. That's right, this is a baseball team in 1870. Now, I don't know why all of them are so thin. I mean, just ridiculously thin. I don't know if they don't eat, they don't have enough food. I have no idea, but all of them just look so thin. Maybe because they could run faster. No idea, but quite an interesting photo, guys. These are the Beach Bunnies in 1950, effectively beauty pageants which would take poses for magazines. And finishing off with this very interesting photo, this was window shopping back in the day in 1937. As you can see here, lots of text everywhere and not that many things on display, at least in this particular shop. So guys, that's it for today's showcase of some of the most interesting pictures of the past. As always, I shall see you later in the next one.